I've known Lydia, I'm going to say it's 30+ years. You're such a perfect guest for today. Your background is perfect because you've been in all the various facets. And what's so great, not only have you been in all these various places, Lydia, is that you have been involved personally with family members who have been in this exact single part in the process. But besides all your various, and you've been in different sides. So, you know, the home health, so we're going to be talking about that as an option, the stay-at-home option. So like you've been through each one of these various parts of this process, which we're very grateful to have you on board. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
Say or
thank you. Well, I greatly appreciate the opportunity. I have been around for a while. I also have a master's in health services administration. So I actually started my career way back in nursing home administration. So I've kind of worked in a lot of different areas. And as Brett said, I, you know, probably from a pretty young age, was dealing with some things personally in my family. My own mother was on the board of a hospice for over 30 years. So I've kind of been indoctrinated in the world of senior living for a long time. So I'm happy to share my knowledge. I don't know everything, but I do know a lot, and I'm happy to then answer any questions that anybody has. It's a really important area to talk about.
All right, so we're going to jump into today's presentation, and it kind of starts in the beginning of the process, which is, you know, as a real estate broker and doing this for 36 years, the question I get from pretty much every single person I talk to when they're thinking about the next stage and where they're going to go is, should I stay in my home? Should I move? And then what are the various options? Like, what can we do? Where can we go? And today we're going to be walking you through some of those things, which would include like aging in place. And Lydia's going to answer kind of like what that looks like. Is it really feasible? Can you really do this? Then we're going to be talking about moving in with the kids, right? Can you live with the kids? Is that possible? What are kind of the pros and, if you will, the cons on living with the kids? And then the third topic, we're going to get into some proactive, like if we want to be proactive and we want to plan in advance, what are the options and the choices for that? And then the final piece that Lydia will talk about is the reactive or the crisis driven, which generally, you know, is not the best option for people. And what does that look like, and what happens in that kind of scenario? And again, those that joined late on the call, feel free to use the Q&A. We have a super large group here, so we're going to hold questions to the end. I'm going to turn it over to Lydia. I'm going to kind of just, you know, throw some questions at her along the way, and you know, keep the presentation moving. We're going to try to go about an hour. So the first option, Lydia, is this aging in place. And I wanted you to just talk a little bit about how does that look, and what's your commentary on that as an option?
Well, you know, many times aging in place becomes a default option because people aren't planning ahead, or they say they're very attached to their home and they want to stay at home. But what does that look like? And one of the most important things you have to do is really look at your home objectively and think about yourself aging in that environment. The thing that occurs to me right away is safety. You know, do you have throw rugs in your home? Where's your bathroom? How's your bathroom set up? Is there a support network around? As I said, sometimes it just becomes a default. So I encourage everybody, since you're on this call and you want to educate yourselves, is to really take a hard look at your home. Would you need to adapt your home? There are organizations out there that specialize in home adaptation and home safety. And I know Brett has a lot of resources.
Which we'll talk about.
Which is great, because you will need that. What assistance may be needed? Well, initially, it might just be yard care or maintenance. As you age, I'm going to recommend you stay off that ladder and don't clean your gutters. If you're in your home, geographically, does it make sense? What if you cannot drive any longer? Are there transportation services around? Transportation is a huge issue in senior care. How about meals? I personally do not like to cook. So if I could have somebody bring my meals in, I would so appreciate that. But as you age in place, it may be harder. And again, you come to those safety concerns too. Then the big nugget is really hands-on care. And Brett, you can go to the next slide, because the first thing we have to talk about are activities of daily living. Now, what the heck are activities of daily living?
Sorry.
These are the things that you're doing every day. We're all doing every day to be able to live safely at home. So for example, bathing, dressing yourself, being able to use the toilet. We don't like to talk about going to the bathroom, but it's important. Can you get yourself in and out of a chair? Can you walk without assistance? We take all these things for granted, but as you're aging in place, things might become more difficult. And usually the first thing that becomes a challenge is bathing. If you have a standard tub, getting your leg over a tub to take a bath or a shower becomes a challenge. And that's also a safety risk. So again, when you're looking at your home and aging in place, what are your bathrooms like? Can you get in and out? Do you have a shower chair? Those are things that, there are adaptive equipment pieces out there that you can look at. But these are really the basic things. And then who's going to be there to help you? Is it your family? Is it your friends? Is it your neighbor? I've had situations where there is no family around, and the neighbors really become very involved in a person's care, rightly or wrongly. And that can be very challenging. The other thing, are they willing to help? We're all busy, kids are all busy, intergenerationally, we're not necessarily around to help you out. A lot of people will say, I don't want to be a burden on my family, but they don't really take that any further and be like, well, how does that happen then? I don't want you to help me, but who is going to help? Because really there is going to be help needed. So if you're at home, there are resources, like I said, for maintenance, yard care, but it's really when you come to healthcare, what does that look like? And often somebody's first experience in the healthcare world when they're at home is needing a joint replacement. You have a knee replaced, you have, a hip replaced, you might be in the hospital, and then you might be discharged to skilled nursing or to like Bryn Mawr rehab for a rehab stay. And then you go home. And what does that picture look like? And that's really where home health is going to come in to provide some skilled needs helping you, but that's for a limited amount of time. If you need ongoing care, that's where a home care company comes into play. It's different between home health and home care, although we tend to use those terms interchangeably. So say you're at home and you just, your ADLs just become more of a challenge. You also have what are called IADLs, independent activities of daily living. And that's like your medication management. Between the ability to take a safe bath or get yourself bathed and medication management, those are usually the two biggest things that will make somebody look at an alternate arrangement than staying at home. Trying to manage a lot of pills can be really tough. Your eyesight changes over years. You're not going to have as much strength. You have limited endurance or diminished endurance, both physically and mentally. There are cognitive changes that happen with aging, whether we like to talk about that or not. Your bones become more fragile. And that's where I say, stay off that ladder. I have so many cases and know so many circumstances because you're at home and you're used to doing these things and you want to stay independent. So you think, oh, I'm just going to go up 2 steps. And I'm saying this because my father just did this, as a matter of fact. The next thing you know, you're on the ground. And that's falling is a huge impact on you. Your hearing changes over time. You have less mobility and agility and decreased flexibility. So I will put out a caution and say, if you are in your same environment in your home, a lot of times you think, well, I need to do all these things and I still can. And I don't really want anybody to help me. But the smarter way to think about it is like, what can you put in place for that help to occur so you can stay independent and be supported in your independence and stay in whatever environment you choose to be. So if that's your home, you really need to look at that a little more objectively. And really think about family, who's there to assist, what friends might be available to assist you. Do you want somebody coming in your home if you have to hire help? I often hear, negative reactions to that. Like, I don't want anybody to come in and sit with me for 4 hours a day, but that might be what you need. Then you have the cost factor of that, because any care at home through a home care agency is privately paid. And the hourly rate is going to be anywhere from right now, like $30 to $35 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And it's all private pay. If you have long-term care insurance, it can assist in that. That's a whole nother topic, but that's really the only thing that's going to pay for that. And people often mistakenly think Medicare will pay for that assistance, and Medicare only pays for short-term skilled like nursing or rehab at home for a limited amount of time until you basically improve and reach your baseline. Medicare is not designed for any long-term chronic care needs. And that's a really important point when you're talking about staying at home.
Absolutely.
It's not easy. It's not, I mean, it's a great thing to have out there. I've worked in the home care field for a long time, but it's a lot of scheduling and managing that schedule. And I will say, I didn't want to say the word COVID, but I have to, because COVID has had such an impact on our labor pool and staffing that it's going to take a while to recover from that. And so we do need to be realistic about who actually is out there to help you. And sometimes people will say, well, I have a friend at church or synagogue or whatever, and they're going to help me. And then you get into all the issues of what's their background like? Are they trained? Are you running a criminal background check? Do they have insurance? You have liability issues. So there are a lot of things to really consider. And then lastly, I'll say, who's going to coordinate all that care, particularly if you're living alone? So if you have this scenario, you don't drive any longer, you can't get around so easily. There are resources out there like geriatric care managers that kind of serve as someone who can assess all the things that you need and then help coordinate those services. Very often it's your children who end up doing that, which might work, it might not work, but just realize it can be a scheduling challenge. So Brad, I know you offer resources.
Yeah. So, and I'm just gonna jump to the next. So one of the things, everybody that's on the call right now, we give them access to this. It's something that we just, offer to the community. So if you ever need something and you decide, yeah, this is the right option, I want to stay in my home, I don't want to move, and Lydia mentioned you might need some resources or some help, or where could you turn? One of the places you could turn is you could call us anytime. We don't charge anything for this. It's just a service we offer for the community, and we have all these various vendors that are available for you, like the elder care financial planner, or a lawyer, or a geriatric case manager, or again, Lydia mentioned the ladder, getting up on that ladder and trying to, clean the leaves or whatnot. You could call us. We have various people. We have a gutter cleaning person. We have handymen, electricians, plumbers. These have been vetted people. So it's not like we're just, sending people that we haven't had any kind of connection to. Either we've used them personally, our clients have used them, and they also get vetted in our home selling process, which is a whole nother topic, but we do check their quality of what they're doing. And anytime that someone says this person is not doing a great job, we'll remove them and we'll, add other people. But in each of these categories, for example, like painters, we probably have, 20 different painters, because clients need different things. Maybe they need to get a house painted quickly, or maybe, you know, it's an authentic paint job they need, or it's a budgetary constraint. So we have people that are just very efficient in that regard. So you're welcome to call us. You could go online, and we're happy. Again, anyone on the call, you can use it. I know some people on the call have used it before, so you know, keep it in mind. I'm going to jump ahead into kind of the next segue, which is, you know, what about the option, Lydia, of you know, moving in with the kids and living with the family, and does that really work? And what's your experience with it?
Well, that's difficult. And sometimes there are assumptions made. You know, you're living at home and you're thinking, well, if something happens to me, I'm just going to move in with my daughter. But you haven't discussed it with your daughter. First of all, you really need to have that discussion. Does your daughter or your son have the space? You know, privacy issues. You know, years ago, this was the common thing to have happen. I'm sure all of us have stories in our families about, well, you know, my aunt moved in with so and so. I mean, that we all lived closer together, and that was very common. There are also cultural concerns with this. I know in certain cultures, the expectation is that your children will take care of you, and to do anything otherwise is really offensive. Way back, I worked at a continuing care retirement community, and I had a family of Indian descent come and bring the mother to look at this community. And she was so angry at them, she wouldn't tour the community. She just sat in the lobby. And, you know, I did get a chance to kind of talk to her privately, and she was very insulted that this was the option they were considering for her, because she expected to live with them, but they had not really talked about it. And it was very sad. So you do need to talk about it. What does that picture look like? Are your children even around? Again, geographically, people move. I've also seen in some situations where you're living in your home and you're thinking, well, I'm going to move closer. So maybe your daughter's in Connecticut. Well, you're going to move there, but then you're completely dependent on your daughter or son, because you don't have that support network socially around you. So leaving a community where you've perhaps established yourself for many years, and maybe you've been involved in a lot of things, then you move to a completely new area, that changes the dynamic in your family relationship as well. And not that there aren't positive things that occur. You know, there are rewards to this. You can do cost savings, cost sharing, cut down your costs. You might have a closer connection then with your grandchildren and able to help them. But it's certainly something that you need to talk about. My mother used to say two things to me, I will say. When I started my career in nursing home administration, she basically said, if you ever put me in a nursing home and I die, I will come back and haunt you. And I was like, okay, good to know. And the other thing is, I'm never going to come and live with you. And I'm like, well, okay, I get that. I am a realist. And so like, I would never say to my mother, I'm not going to promise you anything. I'm not going to promise you're not going to a nursing home. We're going to look at this stage by stage. And if you're out there listening to this and you're in your 50s or your 60s, and you're probably like, okay, well, my home's fine. But maybe in your 70s, it's not going to be. And then maybe you're thinking in your 70s, well, I had already planned to go move with my daughter or son. You need to have that conversation. When we bought our house, I will say, because I've been in this field, my husband got a good chuckle out of me, because I was like, oh, this is great, because I think we could adapt the powder room to a first floor bathroom. If we weren't driving, we could still walk into town. And he finally looked at me and he goes, how old do you think we are? Well, that was, 20 some years ago. And so some of those thoughts are a little stronger today as we kind of face our own decisions too. There are challenges in any environment, but when you're talking about moving in with children, you really have to think about your relationship, the space, privacy, The most ideal situation is going to be if somebody has a mother-in-law suite. I'm actually working with somebody right now who the mother has been living with one of her sons for a long time because they had that in-law suite. However, he and his wife have decided to move to a different home, and it will not have that space. And so they are actually looking for a mom to move to a community setting. And that's going to be a huge change for her, for everybody. And there's kind of a grieving process that's happening right now because it's a tremendous change. But I know that she has valued being with them and the relationship that she has with her grandchildren, which will be wonderful as she moves on to a community.
Hey, Lydia, the one thing I was thinking about is I know that Tracy right now is representing a buyer that's actually looking for a house with an in-laws quarters. So that option's out there. I'm not
Yes.
going to say it's the easiest, right, Trace? I
Right.
mean, it's not
Yeah.
easy.
We are still searching
Yes.
diligently for one.
Yeah.
But we have had some.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's a nice thing if that will work. And that is absolutely the ideal. But then let's go back to as well, you're still aging in place, just in a different setting with your kids. And we come back to coordinating services as well. So, and with this person I'm thinking of too, one of the struggles they've been having is getting home care in because of the labor shortages. Remember, it's been the great retirement, the great resignation, and that has absolutely impacted the home care field. So realize too, you're still in that position. If you're going to work and your mother or father's declining and you're bringing services in, what does that picture look like too? And you as that mother or father have to think about, is that what you want?
So if I hear you, it sounds like you're probably going to favor the next topic the most, because that's the proactive stance and doing the planning and trying to figure this out kind of in advance. Is that pretty much right?
Yes.
Okay.
I am all about planning
Okay.
and trying to be as proactive as possible and talking about the hard topics. But that's me. That's why I welcome this opportunity to educate people. So many people react in a crisis in healthcare, which happens all the time, but there are opportunities to plan. So as you see here, well, Tracy knows there are 55 plus communities out there. And what does that mean? That means you have to be 55 plus and you're moving to a community that basically is going to take care of maintenance and your outdoor things. It's not healthcare included. I have a friend's mother who lives in a 55 plus community that she loves, but where the challenges have come in have been the healthcare. You're still coordinating healthcare and those sorts of services. But that's a fantastic proactive plan, depending on your age and what support network you have out there. And there are a lot of very nice 55 plus communities out there. Continuing care retirement communities. Pennsylvania has a lot of CCRCs. We were actually the first state to really delve into this whole area. And what is a continuing care retirement community? So a CCRC, as they're commonly called, provides different levels of care. So typically you're moving into what's called independent living, maybe an apartment or a villa or a cottage. And you're paying for access to other levels of care, whether that would be personal care or assisted living, and then skilled nursing. Now, back in the day, that was really how a standard CCRC worked. You moved in and you had what was called a type A contract, which was you pay an upfront entry fee, and then you are basically guaranteed healthcare across that continuum of care. Things have changed since then in terms of how CCRCs are modeled. They are communities which are they're regulated by the Department of Insurance in Pennsylvania. They can be a for-profit or a not-for-profit. They can be religiously affiliated. They can be accredited by different organizations. So some of the traditional ones, I'll throw out some names like the Kendall communities. They are Quaker. The Quakers were very proactive in developing this sort of care. So like Kendall Crosslands, Folkways, then you have Whitehorse Village, Dunwoody, Waverly. Beaumont, where I work, kind of falls into there, but we actually, because we are an equity community and you own your apartment or your villa, it's a little different, but the services are the same. As years have gone on and, you know, economics, financials, things have changed, there are other contracts available. It's usually a type A, a type B, which is a modified contract where you might have, you know, X number of days or amount of money towards another level of care. And then there are type C contracts, which are basically a la carte. So for example, at Kendall Crosslands, they have two communities called Coniston and Cartmel that are type C, where you're paying to live in that community and you have priority in assisted living or skilled nursing, but you don't have a guaranteed payment for anything.
Are you guaranteed access to that though?
You have guaranteed access. So for example, if you would need a bed in skilled nursing, they would make that available to you because you're a resident.
Okay.
So just by saying all this, you can see how confusing it can be. So it's really important to know what you're looking at and to understand the contract. More and more people are looking at refundable entry fees as well. So it might be 100% refundable. It might be 90%. It will change the entrance fee into the community. Realize too, there are also, just lost my train of thought. There are communities, I'm so sorry. I was looking at a question already and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know that answer yet. But with CCRCs, when you're looking at there are refundable options, but that changes the cost of the entry fee. And there are also monthly fees involved. So from a financial standpoint, you really have to look at what makes best sense for you. And CCRCs, the traditional CCRCs are really, you have to understand, are the idea of pooled risk. Because again, they are regulated by the Department of Insurance. So you might move there in a type A contract and never need the health center at all. Your spouse might move with you and need a lot of care, or you might not need anything, but that's what insurance is all about, right? We don't know what we're going to need. So that's why the whole development of the refundable entry fees came up. And different options in terms of what a CCRC is. So it might just be independent living and personal care or memory care, or it might be the full continuum of care.
You mentioned, Lydia, that there was between, you had the for-profit and the not-for-profit. Is there a greater quantity of for-profit than non-profit? What do you
I believe in the CCRC world, there are probably more not-for-profits in this area than there are for-profits. And it might not make a difference. You just need to realize, you know, where they're coming from. People will ask, you know, what if I run out of money? And historically in a nonprofit community, what they will do is they'll have a fund set aside to allow for that, if you should outlive your resources. So that's really important. And that's a question you should ask. CCRCs are required to give you a contract for you to review. You might have an attorney look at it. Also a financial disclosure statement, because they do have to hold money in reserve to allow for medical costs. And that's really critical to know, because again, we don't have a crystal ball to know what's going to happen out there. So you want to know, if I run out of money, what will happen to me? Or does it make sense for me to have a type A contract, or really should I just go a la carte? So it's a big topic. It's a big thing to look at. In a CCRC, or really any level of care, are you eligible to move in? So if we go back to a CCRC, there are admissions criteria based on financial issues. Can you afford to live there, but also health? And this is where we talk about planning and being proactive. I cannot tell you the number of times I've talked to people who are 80, 85, 90. I'm just not ready to go. And by the time they are ready to go, they don't meet these eligibility requirements, particularly in the health realm, because you are going to have a physical and you're going to have a cognitive assessment. So again, sometimes it's, you need to have kind of a target age that you want to be moving to a community. You can move to a freestanding personal care community, assisted living. You may have need for a secure, memory care. But I would say the most proactive and planning that you need to do is if you're looking at a CCRC or even a 55 plus community. Health requirements and assessments are a big deal there. And I have seen situations too where a couple has moved to a CCRC, and because of a change in health, perhaps the husband is excluded from the healthcare agreement in that community. So you have to look at that. Then do you have long-term care insurance to cover needs? So there's a lot to consider. You really should go visit any community that you're thinking of, whether it is a CCRC or an assisted living community. You want to know what's out there, do your research. Most importantly, where do you see yourself living? What environment do you want to be in? And if it's that important for you to be in a community like a CCRC or 55 plus, I actually urge you to look at that at a younger age, so you get acclimated to the community before you actually have a health concern. You really don't want to move in having a health concern.
It seems
If you already have,
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
It seems also that these things sound so complex. It does seem like good advice I heard you mention earlier is the elder lawyer to
Yes,
look at these various contracts to figure
absolutely.
out, what are the pros, cons? Am I protected? What happens if my money runs out?
Right.
Do I go to, I like the idea of the not-for-profit because it seems like they have a better ability to help you if the funds run dry.
Mm-hmm.
And all
Right.
of these different areas and all these different places have different contracts.
Yes, correct.
So that's important that, there's not just one blank contract that covers all this.
No.
Each of these places are going to have different contracts that are going to need to be looked at.
Right. And I will tell you, it can be very confusing. I actually had an aunt who, was very much a planner, and God bless her for being a planner, because she went around, she would look at all these different communities, and then she would promptly send the contracts to me. I am not an attorney. I do, as I said, I know a lot about this, but I could kind of go through the contract and say to her, just realize this, this, and this, but like ultimately you need to have an elder law attorney look at this. And also from a financial perspective, you need to talk to your financial person and make sure this makes sense for your particular situation at your age. Again, and that's a lot of it, looking at your age and your savings to see how long that will last you, and to ask that question, what will happen if I do run out? Now, you might say, okay, I'm not really interested in a CCRC. All right, well, we all know there's assisted living facilities out there. There's personal care. They are regulated by the Department of Human Services. And I will say in Pennsylvania, it's a little confusing. We actually differentiate between personal care and assisted living, which is weird and silly. We tend to use the terms interchangeably because basically most of the services are the same. In Pennsylvania, all personal care and assisted living is private pay. Okay. So either that's out of pocket or long-term care insurance is going to pay for that. Pennsylvania divided the regulations about, 10 or so years ago, longer than that, in an effort to, at some point, allow for Medicaid to pay for beds in assisted living. It has never happened. And we do not know if it ever will happen. But that was really the purpose. And then also there are kind of design parameters that have to be followed in assisted living versus personal care. So typically what you'll see in if it's an older community, they're going to stay as personal care. Newer construction might be assisted living because there's certain things and I won't go, it's a whole long deal you don't need to know about, but you just understand. For example, at Beaumont, we have personal care. I have to remind people we don't market ourselves as assisted living, even though the services we provide are basically the same. Many of these communities also have what's called memory care, and that's a special set of regulations under personal care regulations and assisted living that allow for what's called a secure dementia care unit, or an SDCU. And that means it can be a locked unit. So that's another thing. If you might have, as a couple, you might end up living in personal care, and a spouse might be in memory care. They are not inexpensive. Again, you want to go and do your research. You want to look at them. What services do they provide? What's the staff ratio? And again, what happens if I can't afford it any longer? Many or most freestanding personal care and assisted living are exactly that. They don't have skilled nursing attached to that. So it may become an issue where they can no longer support you in aging in place in that particular environment, and you would move to a nursing home. Nobody wants to live in a nursing home,
So
but it does happen.
Your mom was the one that said that, right?
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, and I will, and not to be negative about a nursing home, but the reality is that it's a tough environment to live in. It's the highest level of care. It's very expensive. You can run out of money. You can go through your assets. So you definitely want to be talking to somebody in your financial world prior. You can spend down your money and end up on Medicaid. Does the nursing home have a Medicaid bed? What is the type of care? And to back up, I will tell you, in doing your research, there is information out there. You can Google, skilled nursing facilities in the Philadelphia area or personal care. We're all surveyed. We all have to abide by regulations, and the surveys are public documents. I will caution you, though, you might not know how to read that document. And so that's where it might be smart to talk to somebody who does understand, because you might look at a survey from, for example, a personal care community and see 10 citations, but they might all be tiny little things, but to you, they're like, oh my goodness, there's 10 citations. But somebody in the field will know, like, these really don't rise to a big deal. In skilled nursing, Medicare is involved. And so you're going to look at the star rating for a nursing home. Typically you want to look for a 5-star rating, and there's a lot that goes into that rating. So again, there are a lot of things to consider. Again, with like a personal care, assisted living, and skilled nursing, it could be a for-profit, it could be a not-for-profit, it could have a religious affiliation. Assisted living or personal care may or may not have a memory care unit. I kind of am emphasizing the memory care part because Alzheimer's and dementia is such a huge area of senior living. And the diagnosis of Alzheimer's is just increasing all the time. COVID has had a significant impact on our seniors and cognitive decline. So those resources are really important to know about. That's a lot of information, I know.
I agree.
So it seems like, Lydia, what's your advice on, like, to be proactive? Like, how far in advance do the proactive people really start? Do you think it's, like 2 years, 5 years? When should someone be thinking about that before we segue into the reactive, which seems to be, what usually happens is most people say, I'm not dealing with this, I'm just going to put it off, I'm fine. And then we get into my next topic, which will be reactive. But in the proactive side, how much time, what do you see out there?
Well, I will say overall, most people don't look at this early enough. You can certainly move into a CCRC in your 60s.
Okay.
Obviously, a 55 plus community is what it is. I think the first thing is educating yourself, because what typically happens is that people wait until they're 80 or more. I have seen 90-year-olds move into independent living, and I kind of am a little puzzled about that. We're all living longer, And we all tend to put off things and say, we don't think we're going to need that. And if you're thinking from the proactive stance about a community setting, I can't stress enough the importance of moving in while you're healthy, or even in personal care, moderately healthy, so you can actually participate in the social aspect of that community. You don't want to move in and immediately be incapacitated and not have a network of friends of that community. And that's a very sad thing to have happen. So the more that you start looking at this, and even in your 60s saying, well, I wouldn't want to be there till I'm in my 70s, at least know what is out there and where you might be comfortable, because you need to go and spend time. You need to meet the residents of the communities. You need to have a meal there. And you need to say, like, well, is this a good fit for me? And only you will know that.
It's really a fit thing, because like we talked
Absolutely.
about this before today when we were talking about what we were going to cover, and that was one of the things we talked about. It seems like all these communities have a unique kind of like personality, if you will.
They do.
And they have different things. Like I've had people that have, I've identified it must have a swimming pool, right? I swim and it's just like super critical. So it eliminates like so many places, or,
Right.
Certain things they like, woodworking or whatever that might be. Not everyone has that in their that's not their community makeup.
Right. I worked at Kendall many years ago. And it's Kendall Crosslands is a Quaker community. It's owned by the Kendall Corporation. And it was at the time, it was a very modest community, very humble residents there, very, very neutral, nondescript entry. And if somebody would come to visit and they were expecting what I would call the cruise ship experience, like glitz and glamour, I knew right away, I'm like, this is not the community for you. And that's fine, because it's not every community is right for everybody. And also, like at Kendall and Crosslands, they were very resident directed communities, and they had about 80 resident committees at each community.
Wow.
And and they were very busy people, and they were wonderful. But if you would move in there and you had a problem being approached by residents saying, oh, will you be on our committee? Will you come to the wood shop? Do you want to do pottery? Can you be on, will you help in the library? If that was going to be overwhelming to you, that was not going to be your thing. So you have to go and spend time. The other thing is food. You're moving into a community and you're going to be getting at least 3 meals a day. Nobody is 100% happy with food. And it's real. I've seen this everywhere because it does become such a focus. But you do need to go and try a meal. But realizing too, it's a tough thing to do, to provide for a large population of people three meals a day. You're not going to satisfy everybody.
So you typically, it wouldn't be like the experience of like the Four Seasons, I take it,
It depends on the community.
It could be. Okay.
It depends on the community. But I've met some residents that they're never happy with any of it. Other people love the food, but food becomes a huge issue as you age, definitely. And your tastes change too.
And some communities offer different places to eat too in their community, which is nice too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, you can have 5 dining rooms, you can have, a cafe. It's a huge focus of any community.
I just visited one. I have a client, actually, we're selling their property and I had to get some documents signed, and I'll leave the community name out, but I'll say kind of where it is. It's kind of like off the 476 in Plymouth. It's a relatively new community, and I did a tour of it, and they had this room. I swear it looked like it was in a bar, but they show movies. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, my God, this is like the nicest facility. I've never seen anything so well done. They just did a great job with the ambiance. It had a game room with all kinds of like coin operated machinery in it. It had it looked like you were in a little French town, because it had a cobblestone feeling walkway into the dining room. It was very well done. And it's, brand new, state of the art. So
there are a lot of communities, particularly in the assisted living, personal care world, that are being built. I will caution, again, there is a caution here about just looks like it's great to walk in and see, and you have to feel that, and like, oh, they have, you know, a theater or this or that. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the staff, and it's going to come down to the care. My mother-in-law lives in a community in Florida, and we actually hired a geriatric care manager to help assess different communities there. And I remember the one thing, and this really stuck with me, that she said, you know, she was recommending a community that had been around for a while. And she said, it's not the shiny penny. And she said, however, the staff is there. They stay a long time, which is great. There's not much turnover, and they are known for excellent care. And that's where my mother-in-law ended up living. And she's now in the memory care part of that community. But it stuck with me that a lot of times you can be really wowed by the shiny penny. But you really have to remember to ask the hard questions, because it's not all bricks and mortar and, you know, how big is my room? It's going to come down. You're going to spend most of your time with the staff there, honestly. And, you know, what does that staff ratios look like? What's the care like? So just keep that in mind. And you know what? The other thing I'm going to remind people, if you have pets, not every community is pet friendly. You want to ask that question. The other thing is, what provisions then are you making for those pets? So just, I'll put that out there.
I think those are, I mean, that's probably the two best takeaways I've heard. I mean, I love the ratio of, you know, the help, and that's really what it's all about. It's going to be who's taking care of you, and you know, and what the turnover ratio of those people are. Are they turning people over all the time, or are they there consistently day in, day out? Because I have heard that, and when I do visit clients in some of these places, I've seen it at the front counter when I sign in. You can kind of get a vibe and a feeling just by seeing who they have at their front counter and all sometimes. So, which is interesting.
Oh yeah.
So good segue, I think, Lydia, into kind of the next segue and kind of our last segue for today before we have some closing remarks, and that is the reactive mode, where, you know, it seems to me that seems to be where most people kind of fall, and it's just, I don't know, you call that human nature, or is this, you know, there's a crisis, something happens, health changes, something happens, and we need to, you know, move mom or dad from the house to somewhere. And is that pretty much what you see out there, Lydia?
Yes, because we all think we're never going to need any care, right? You know, and that is very much human nature, as you said, Brett. And that's why the people on this seminar are so smart to listen and to understand what's out there. So many times it is a crisis. You know, you think that you're doing fine at home, and then you have that fall off the ladder and you break a hip, or you need, you know, I've seen people fall off ladders and break the wrist. And then what? You know, so a typical path would be you end up in the hospital and you get whatever treatment you need. Then you need rehab. Where's that rehab going to be? Usually in a skilled nursing facility, maybe a rehab hospital. What's going to happen after that? That's not going to be a long-term stay. That's going to be a short-term stay paid under Medicare A. But it's the limited amount of time. Are you able to go back home and continue aging in place, or are there more services now needed? Then what? And this is where, you know, the children get involved. It's like, oh my gosh, where's mom going to go? And it might have been, for example, an unrecognized cognitive decline that led to a fall in the home, and they end up in the hospital, and they absolutely cannot go home. Or if they would go home, they would need so much care. It was cost prohibitive. So that's when people are then rushing. You know, is the person appropriate to be in an assisted living facility or personal care? Is the cognitive decline so severe that they have to be in memory care? So those are kind of the reactive things, and people don't always know, you know, how to even assess any of this. This is where I get calls from friends, my own friends, like, what do I do? This is what happened with my mother.
Mom,
yeah, you know, and we all have friends we reach out to for advice. And this is where a geriatric care manager can be very helpful, because they can do that research for you and help you assess where is the best place. this is the sad side of things, though, in senior living, because you do have things that are very much in a crisis mode, and things have to happen like ASAP. And
Yeah.
that's hard to make a good educated decision. And not that you can't move to assisted living and move to a different community. Not that, you might move to a memory care and then move to a different one, but you want to be able to, assess things a little more clearly and really feel like you're making a good decision. And then, there's the issue of your home, and then what's going to happen at your home, and selling things. And I know, Brett, you have all these wonderful resources, but that takes a lot of work, and who is available to help do all that. In a perfect world, we would all start looking at all this at least in our 50s. We would start looking at our home and saying, wow, I better start cleaning things. I'm looking at my stuff. I have a lot of stuff. And, how am I going to put a plan in place to have somebody clean out my home? It's not going to happen. The full picture of that usually does not happen. But if you start thinking about some of these things now, it's really helpful.
One of the other things, Lydia, you mentioned about the resources, and for those on the call that maybe came in late, there was a slide we shared kind of early on, which talked about some of the resources those on the call have access to. So if you find you are in that situation and need help with, it becomes a reactive situation maybe, or a proactive, whichever, but there's the need to move from your house to assisted living or some type of retirement facility. One of the biggest challenges we find is that, what to do with all your stuff, right, Lydia? You mentioned
absolutely.
the collections and the stuff, and that's a challenge. And then we get into the brownwood. Is there, brownwood? Because all the millennials today, they want, Pottery Barn and
right.
IKEA and restoration hardware, right? So you might have mahogany or cherry or all this great furniture, but that has a little longer window of, sourcing it and figuring out where to go. But if you need help with any of those things, we have those resources available. Just, you can call us. We're happy to help you. We've had some situations recently, Lydia, where we had some clients that, sometimes just turn over the keys and say, here you go, figure it all out. And we have to source, books and collectibles. But we have a whole gamut of people that can come in, from some downsizing people. We have some transition management people we deal with, and help and figure out what things in the house do you really, really need, and where are you going to, and what does that look like, right? How much space do you have? And then we figure out, okay, 60% of the stuff is going to go to an antiques dealer or an auction or a tag sale or donation, and what do you have to work with? So that does have, there's a time, it's not something that happens immediately. It does take some time.
Right. Downsizing services are so helpful. And that's a great point, Brett, because say you are moving to a continuing care retirement community, it's hard to always visualize what space you have and what you should take. And there are those resources. They'll come, they'll measure, they'll do a layout for you to help you visualize. Because it is hard going from like your big home to maybe a 2-bedroom apartment in a CCRC. But it takes time to do that. But there's wonderful resources.
Absolutely.
So that's a good segue into just, some short closing remarks, and then we're going to open up to questions and answers. I know we've had a lot, Lydia, posted in the some chat in the some people have posted some questions, so we're going to get to those as well. But we have so many people on the call that we had to save everything till the end. Just some closing remarks. We're here to help you. So this is not, it's complex and everything, but we're here if you have questions or some things. What we might find, Lydia, some of the questions maybe are more personal nature. So they might be held, if it's not something that maybe is beneficial to the whole group, we might, just stick with the ones that are kind of more generic, if you will.
Sure.
But I think the real key point, and I think we've heard this from Lydia multiple times, is that it's people do, put it off. It's, you just don't like to talk about it. And you think, it's not going to happen to me and I don't have to worry about it. But it seems like the ones that get the biggest benefit are the ones that, proactively plan in advance, right? Because then you can get your agreements reviewed properly by like the elder lawyer. You can talk to your elder financial planner and figure out how much resources you have so that the well doesn't run dry, and you pick a place where if you're covered if you don't have the resources, right? Because you talked about the profit and the nonprofit, and it seemed like that was a great piece of advice. And my final point is, I've been doing this for 36 years as a real estate broker. If you ever thought of if aging in place is not the right move, and we can't answer that. That's like a person, that's something you're going to decide which of these options make best sense for you. But if you decide, I don't think the aging in place makes sense, I want to look at some other type of community, and you need real estate help, we're here for you for that. We think the prices are at the highest level we've ever seen in my 36 years. It will keep going. I mean, my mom always said, what goes up must come down. And, sustainability, I mean, who knows? I mean, rates are rising and all that, but, you don't know, but it's certainly not a bad time, if you can, if you can sell now. And I always, in some of our other webinars, although this isn't specific to real estate, if you ever wanted to, we have some other ones where we talk very specifically about how to save some money on taxes on the sale of your home. You're welcome to sign up for some other webinars, but I would encourage everyone to, connect with us on social, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why. The number one reason, and Tracy, that one of our favorite events we do, and everyone on the call, you'll be invited and a guest, is our Thanksgiving, pie day, which is really fun. We really enjoy that. We gave, how many pies, Tracy? Like a ton this year of pies.
Yeah, it felt like hundreds.
Yeah, and it was cold. We were outside because of,
it was cold this year.
Yeah, maybe this next one will be inside and won't be as cold. Actually, no, I think we're getting a tent this year. I think we decided we're going to keep it outside, but do a tent. But again, please like us, follow us, and we have all kinds of things planned. Hopefully with COVID kind of relaxing, we'll be in a better position where we'll be able to, do some more things. And we want to open it up now to some, question and answers. And
Lydia, I'd like to say thank you so much. Your information was amazing today. So much information. I think we could have 7 more seminars on this because there's just so much information that people really do need to hear about. And there's just so much out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And, above all else, it's just so important to think about how do you want your life to be? And so that's why I'm such an advocate of planning, because at the end of the day, it's your life, it's your quality of life. You got to think about that, and where do you see yourself living?
I agree.
And Tracy had a good segue about we could have 15 more of these workshops. And funny that you mentioned that. We set up one for Saturday, May 14th as a follow-up, and we were kind of waiting to see what we had question-wise and see who our next guest would be in that world. So again, we don't have an itinerary yet, but we've tentatively said May 14th. So
stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. Okay. So questions, let's see what we have for questions. Do you want me to start? How about, does PCA offer this information to 55+ communities? For Lydia.
What was that? Does PCA?
Yeah, offer this information.
For 55+, probably not. I think, and Tracy, you would probably know better than I because you've been in that world, but to get information on 55+ communities, there are probably resources out there, a lot of senior living publications that will list them.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they are not healthcare. They don't provide healthcare.
We actually have a list at our office of our local 55+ communities, and I can search throughout the state, to be honest, and beyond.
The other question we got, I think, from a couple people, or maybe it was I saw it in the Q&A about, is there a recording available? And yes, we did record it. I'll say I started it probably a little late. I think right when we introduced you, Lydia, I was able to turn on the recording, but we will put that out there and we'll share it for everyone, or if you want to send it to your friends and family, that's a-okay. So that was the question, Trace. Yeah, there was a question about the communities and the types and everything. Plus, we, as a real estate company, we visited a lot of these facilities and we took our own notes and made our own assessments on some of the various communities, which was a lot of fun to go around and kind of like, you know, try to get the vibe, if you will, Lydia, of these various places, because they all have like a totally different vibe, you know. And
it's so awesome that you guys did that too. I mean, that is such great research, and just to have that personal opinion of places that you went and how you felt when you went too is great.
Yeah, so we did that. Any other questions we had? Actually, maybe not as many as resources. Oh, please provide the resource information that you spoke of. Okay, so I think we could put that out, right?
And if I can add to that in terms of resources, just to help, you know, initially in doing research, realize that CCRCs, again, are regulated by the Department of Insurance. You can basically Google CCRCs in Pennsylvania, you know, or if you have one in particular, you can Google it. A lot of their financial disclosure statements are online and you can read through them. Then for like personal care or assisted living, those communities are regulated by the Department of Human Services. So you can go online to DHS, and there are all sorts of resources for consumers. You can look up all sorts of providers. You can look at their survey results. Then, of course, you know, all these communities have their own websites. Skilled nursing, same thing. They are regulated by the Department of Health. So again, you can go online. You can see what their Medicare star rating is. You can look at their surveys. Home care is regulated by the Department of Health. So home care, like if you're looking for in-home companions or caregivers, first of all, realize there's a difference. A caregiver or an aide is somebody who provides hands-on care. A companion might be somebody you're hiring just for driving or to, you know, just do some things around your house. But the home care world was finally licensed and regulated, oh gosh, about 12 or 13 years ago. So you want to look at that and see what's involved. There are so many different home care agencies. There was just a huge proliferation once the licensure happened. And then there's skilled home health, which like a name like Bayada would be an example of that. And again, that information is online. But, you know, the best thing you can always do is talk to somebody who's used the services or who's lived in a community, and to help guide you, and then to go visit places as well.
The other thing, Lydia, is I'm a volunteer at Surrey and Surrey Services, and you mentioned early on today about, which I really liked, about, you said about, you know, if you're doing the stay-at-home option, about if you have someone coming in, do you really like background check them? And I remember like they put me through this questionnaire. I was like, all these things to be like a volunteer driver for people. And you know, I could see how someone would just, you know, maybe bring someone on their house, and then the next thing you know, things are missing, or, you know,
it happens all the time, unfortunately.
You got to be like really, really careful, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah, that's a tough area. And a lot of times what happens is that happens because of cost, because it is expensive. And so you might say, oh, my friend from wherever, you know, has volunteered and she's only going to charge me, you know, like $20 an hour. Well, there's a reason for that. You know, does that person have liability insurance? You become the employer then. Are you going to pay the taxes? So there are a lot of considerations with that, beyond just like the criminal background. You know, is this person a reputable person?
Correct. Yeah.
And then it seems to me that in the proactive versus the reactive, it just seems like, you know, it just seems like everybody just seems to fall into that, you know, reactive state. And it just seems like you just don't have the ability to do your homework and, you know, have your documents reviewed and figure out like financial. And it just seems like that's just an unfortunate, that's where all the problems fall, in that one area. And if there's anything we could do in this call by those that are listening, is to get the information well in advance, to not fall into that trap. So you're in a better place, like, you know, by pre-planning.
One
Brett,
of
I
the
have
pieces,
two. Oh, go ahead, Lydia.
well, I was just going to say, one of the things I've always been told, and I very much agree with, is that you need an advocate in healthcare, particularly. So, you know, as things start to change in your life, you need to have somebody with you, whether it's a child or somebody, a friend, or a hired resource like a care manager, to be your advocate and to make sure the right questions are asked and that you're getting the answers that make sense for you.
And that maybe is a segue into a future webinar. Maybe it is like a geriatric care manager to talk about like what some of the things are available to get for someone who needs that help, right? To assist people, because it's something you haven't been through. So like, how do you know, like, what questions to ask, or like, you know, where to go?
So I have two websites that I'd like to share with everybody. The first one's seniorhousing.org. It's a great website. And then the other one is eldercare.gov. Great websites, great information, lots of information about everything we talked about today.
And there are the local area agencies on aging that provide a lot of resources as well. So it's a matter of just start doing your research and then seeing what questions you have. This whole topic just brings up so many questions, and it's very thought-provoking, which it should be.
Absolutely.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to share, as soon as my computer, I think it went to sleep, is I wanted to let you know, the next, again, we talked about was the May 14th, but the other thing is we're going to be sending everybody on the call a survey, and it's very helpful to us to know, like, what kind of things do you think would be helpful or beneficial for either the next webinar, because we're very passionate and interested in this topic, and if there's any improvements you could think of, because we've been doing these webinars for a long time, and especially during COVID, we used to do these in person, and as soon as COVID occurred, we just, have been going in Zoom. I suspect at some time we'll probably be doing them again out in the public, but this would be really helpful for anyone on the call if you could, tell us if there's anything you think you'd like to hear about in the next one. Would be very beneficial.
Okay, and Brett, someone asked me to repeat those websites. So the first one is www.seniorhousing, or seniors plus seniors housing. The second one is www.eldercare.gov.
Thank you, Trey. That's awesome. We actually did start, it's interesting because someone asked about a list of communities, and, I think, Lydia, we talked about this offline, that there are resources that I'm kind of like not sure to share, because I think some of them have, like, the people that are on these lists are paid, to be on the list. So I don't know how good is that list really, right? If you have to pay to be on it.
Right.
So we actually started, when we visit all these sites, that was one of our goals, was to kind of develop a grid on every single place. And it's kind of in production, but it's an involved process, so it's going to take us some time.
Yeah, but that's a great point, Brett. I'm actually glad you brought that up, because for example, like a Place for Mom, I hear a lot about, and not that it's a bad resource, but realize that the communities are paying to be recommended. So you have to kind of know how the money flows with some of that too.
So you might not be getting like the best, like,
exactly,
or all the information, right? Because there might be facilities that don't have a need for, they're so busy and they get so many referrals and their care level's so great that they don't need to spend marketing dollars to a company like that.
Correct.
Good point. Any other questions? Did I miss anything? Tell me if I missed, because it's hard to, like, when I have so many people, it's so hard to keep track of all this. But this has been phenomenal. Like I've never, we've been doing these webinars. We had, I think it was just a little over 73 people, which is, I think it speaks to, people want to, they want the information about the topic. I mean, that's all I can
And
say.
there's so much information. It's just so much information. It really is. It can be overwhelming.
Yes,
but it's important
absolutely.
they know that there's people like us out here that can help.
Right. There are resources, and this is just a broad overview. You could, like Brett was saying, you could do a session on each of these. But the most important thing is just to know what's out there. Like, what are all these options, and then take it from there and do the research.
But again, I think we'll wrap. But Lydia, I have to tell you, you have first of all extreme passion in the topic. Like, you can just, you just are such a perfect guest for us to have.
Oh, thank you.
Not just the energy level, but you have the passion, but it's the experience of, you have been in all these various facilities and different parts of this process. Plus, you've been involved personally, like with family members. So you've been through the process, which is so great to have you as a guest today. So we're very fortunate, and we greatly appreciate your time.
Well,
today.
thank you for having me. I'm very happy to do
Lydia.
it. I just saw a question pop up about
go ahead.
long-term care insurance, whether it would cover a home health aide. And I just want to say, you have to check the policy. If you have a long-term care insurance policy, you have to know what levels of care it will cover. You might have a policy that only covers home health care. But most policies are going to cover, home care, care in assisted living, and care in skilled nursing. But you really need to read your policy. You need to know what will start the policy when you open a claim. If you have an elimination period, I mean, that's a whole nother session, but you really need to know what's in your policy.
And the elimination is the number of days before the policy actually kicks in, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And that would be, the possibility for other workshops might be, the senior or the elder lawyer, I think would be a beneficial one as well.
Absolutely.
It seems like those were the questions, were all about that kind of stuff. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think taxes too. I think taxes are a huge, when you're selling, purchasing, that's a whole nother, there's so many topics.
Yep.
Great. Well, I think we went maybe a tad over. I apologize. We had a large audience. We had phenomenal questions, and we had an excellent guest. So we're very happy. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoy the day. And the person that started in Valley Forge on the call, maybe we'll see you out in Valley Forge Park today on a walk or something.
All right. Bye-bye.
Stay well, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.